Fortnite's new auto editing mechanic changes everything. Now, Fortnite just introduced a brand new mechanic with the release of Chapter 6 called Simple Editing. I like to call it auto editing because that's basically what it is, but it was just newly released. And as you guys can see in the background video here, it's literally exactly how it sounds. It's just automatically editing to where you don't have to move your cursor around to actually edit it how you want it to look. Now, there are some limitations with this, but you're able to make just about any shape that you want with your build, so you don't actually have to technically really learn how to do these quickly. You can kind of just do it by pressing a singular button in game. Now, like I said, there are some limitations, like in the bottom right of a wall and the bottom left of a wall, you can't make a peanut butter edit. It's like all four of the squares in the bottom right and left of a wall. But other than that, it's honestly pretty good, besides for it being a little bit slow, but obviously it is for mostly new players to begin with. Now, this mechanic makes editing so much simpler and easier to deal with. I know when I first started learning how to edit, it was very confusing for me because obviously this is a mechanic that not many people have dealt with, especially in a battle royale, especially in a shooter game. It's like a mini concepts like stacked on top of each other, and a lot of people can kind of freak out or get overwhelmed with how much there is to learn in Fortnite, especially with the giant skill gap that there is nowadays. Like, there's either people that are really good at editing, or they're really bad and just cannot compete, creating a crazy skill gap there. But now with this new simple editing feature, it makes it so much easier for not only people to learn how to initially do it, but to get a lot better with it a lot quicker. Now, I've played with this activated in-game, and to be honest, sometimes I prefer it over actual editing, and sometimes I do not. Like I said before, it does feel a little bit slow, but overall, when you're doing like quick thinking things or you need to quickly make an edit, honestly, it's not really that much faster, to be honest. I feel like if anything, it's a bit more clunky and, like I said, slow, but that's because I've really been used to editing, regularly. I haven't necessarily practiced it, and I wouldn't say that I'm like a pro. I'm not really the best player in the world. I'm all right, but I can hold my own in most games. And to be honest, the simple editing feature doesn't feel like it was really made for me. It doesn't feel like I should have it enabled. It feels like it is mostly for new players, but obviously this is something that's going to grow over time. Like, they just now released it. They said that it's in beta currently, and obviously they're going to take feedback from players to see how they can improve it, different styles of edits that they could add as well, but they are a bit limited with that because there's only so many different places that you can look on a wall to make it do certain things. So we'll see how this progresses overall, but at the moment right now, it feels like it is mostly for new players. And that is what I want to talk about in today's video, about how this changes a lot of things for a lot of players. First off, it could make a lot of no build players, people who will absolutely not play builds, maybe come back and try to play builds, because this really doesn't take long to learn. I mean, you literally press a singular button. If you just get used to pressing your edit button or choosing a button that works well with your controller or your keyboard or whatever, it's really not that difficult to figure out, and I think a lot of people would like it. Obviously, building is still a really big skill gap also. If you're not really good at building, you really can't edit, so it doesn't really matter all that much. And I believe Fortnite was actually testing an auto builds feature too, where it would build certain structures just by the tap of a button as well. I don't know if that was scrapped or not, but that remains to be seen, and maybe they are tossing that around with them putting in simple editing as well. Now, there's been a lot of controversy, especially on Twitter, and I haven't seen as much on YouTube. Not many people talking about this in depth on YouTube, about it possibly lowering or raising the skill gap. Mostly I've seen people saying it's going to raise the skill gap and make sweaty players even sweatier, and if you've played with it in game, I think it's very easy to see that that is not what's going to happen. First off, it's probably going to lower it. It makes it easier for new players to learn how to edit and to just figure out the basic mechanics. Like, a new player doesn't really have time to figure out that like a peanut butter edit in the top right corner is going to be best if you want a right hand peek when you box somebody or something like that. They don't really want to take time to figure that out. There's so much things for new players to figure out nowadays. I literally don't know if I could play Fortnite if I didn't start when it first came out, to be completely honest. So if anything, I feel like it lowers the skill gap definitely. Auto editing would actually, I feel, especially after playing it, would slow down and hinder someone who's like mastered editing from being as fast as they could be. Like, if you watch these pro players and the competitive players, they're really good at editing. Being able to do it that fast really isn't possible with auto editing unless you're like really ahead of yourself and knowing what you're going to do beforehand, which most of new players are. But I feel like because of how clunky and like slow it is to begin with, I don't know if it's necessarily my internet or just my controller, but it does feel like there's a little bit of a delay between me pressing the button and it actually editing. So I'm not 100% sure if that's the experience for everybody, but so far that has been my experience. So based on that, I feel like it will actually lower the skill gap quite a lot, because once you master like building, you're really pretty much good. Like, editing really isn't that hard to learn after this if you have the simple editing mechanic. mechanic down. Now, obviously, like I said, this is great for new players and makes the game so much more friendly and less intimidating. There are probably a ton of people who are not playing Fortnite right now or not trying out the game, not necessarily because they see it as like a kid's game in quotation marks, but because there's so many things you have to learn. And it's like, this game has been out for 7 years. Like Battle Royale has been out for 7 years. So people have had all this time to get used to new mechanics and get used to building and editing. Editing used to not even be a thing in Fortnite. Like there was literally no use for editing. I remember even telling my friends, like, why are we even able to edit these builds? When would you ever use that? And now it's something that you have to know how to do if you want to be really competitive in this game. So I feel like now that there's a simple editing mechanic, people might see that on like social media and places like that and think, maybe I could actually play this game. Or like I said before, maybe I don't have to play no builds. Maybe I could just, you know, kind of figure out builds. And with the simple editing mechanic, I could actually hold my own against a lot of better players. Specifically that I've noticed that's been glaring for me is that this will probably be much better for controller players, because editing on controller is much harder than editing on a keyboard and mouse. With keyboard and mouse, you have so much free movement. You can go precisely where you want to. And obviously they have their like whole hand and their arm to aim with. Just like the whole thing why aim assist exists is because on a controller, you're literally just using your thumb to control it. And it's much harder than having your whole hand and your whole arm to control it. Not only is this good for people who want to try out builds after, you know, not being able to get good at editing or be worried about building and things like that, but it's also much easier for controller players to hold their own against keyboard and mouse players. And talk about a skill gap. The skill gap between keyboard and mouse players and controller players has grown rapidly over the last couple years, because keyboard players just continue to get better and there's more and more mechanics in the game. I feel like eventually we're gonna like run out of you know, buttons on a controller to be able to do all the different movement things that there are in the game, to be honest. I believe this does lower the skill gap between controller players and keyboard and mouse. It definitely probably would be a lot easier on controller than it is on keyboard and mouse. If you're on keyboard and mouse, I'd honestly probably just say stick with regular editing, because you're going to be able to be much faster once you get good at it than when you would with simple editing. So overall, I feel like simple editing is going to level the playing field for Fortnite a lot. Like, it's going to be a lot different now. I think a lot of new players are going to come to the game. More people are going to be trying out builds, and you're going to see kind of like mediocre players become a lot better, while the really good players are still going to be there and continue to advance, while, you know, the mediocre players are kind of able to get close to or maybe even ahead of them as they learn editing and get smoother with it. Now, overall, I love it. I think it's awesome. Like I said, I play on controller on my PS5. I think it's great, but let me know what you guys think about it down below in the comments. Do you like simple editing? What do you think of it? Let me know. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, use code Prozeroyt, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.